I have passed this condition on to my children. That is a fact. And there is guilt attached to that. Real guilt, persistent guilt, not fully resolved depending on the day. This episode isn't going to wrap it up neatly, but it is going to look at it clearly because guilt this size deserves to be examined rather than just carried. So here's what I've worked out about guilt. It's not really about the condition. I can live with having passed on EDS. What I can't live with, what actually keeps me up, is the idea that someone might look at my children and see less than they are. Pity, the low ceiling, the assumption that the diagnosis is the most interesting thing about them. There's a particular cruelty to EDS being so unknown. I can't even name it and expect understanding to follow. I say it and people think, oh, they're a bit flexible, or the pitying head tilt arrives, aimed at my children, as though having a condition is something to be ashamed of, or not noticing it sooner is somehow a moral failure. Either way, I lose. Either they don't understand, or they feel sorry for them. And I don't want anyone feeling sorry for my children. It's the hardest with my middle daughter because her invisible illness has a sound. She opens her mouth and strangers start cataloguing her before they've even met her. And I've caught myself doing something that I know is completely absurd. I let people assume that she's deaf rather than opening a conversation that will end in that head tilt. I'd rather that they have the wrong answer than have the right one delivered with pity. I know how that sounds. But if you've spent a lifetime watching people decide on what someone is capable of in the first 30 seconds of meeting them, based on nothing more than how they sound or how they move or what labels they carry, you'd make that same calculation. What I carry for her is very specific. Quiet grief that I don't carry for myself anymore. I've made a kind of peace with my own situation. Hers I'm still working on. Here's the part I don't particularly enjoy admitting. There was a period in my life when I really underestimated myself, where the condition was a convenient, legitimate, completely hard to argue with reason not to push, not to try, not to reach. I had an excellent excuse, and sometimes I used it. And I'm not proud of that, but I understand it because I know exactly where I learnt it. My mum didn't know she was a carrier until after I was diagnosed. There was no family history to warn her, no context or roadmap, just a baby who cried constantly, turned out to have dislocated hips and shoulders, covered in bruises, and a diagnosis that she'd never heard of arriving completely out of nowhere. She wasn't symptomatic herself. She'd never lived inside this condition. She couldn't know what it felt like from the inside, what it could do, what it couldn't do, what happened when you pushed and what happened when you didn't. What she had was medical facts, fear, and a cultural script for what you do with a disabled child. And she followed it faithfully with complete love because she had nothing else to go on. She raised me carefully, protectively. Hockey and PE, I had to sit out in case I got hurt. Going to town with friends, she'd have to drive me because I wouldn't be able to walk it on my own. The world had already shown her what happened when she wasn't watching closely enough. She'd nearly been suspected of harming me when she was desperately trying to protect me. And of course, she wrapped me in cotton wool. And I accepted it quietly and without question because she was my mum and she was guiding me, and that's what you do. I didn't argue that I should at least try. I didn't push back. I just accepted my fate because the person I trusted most had decided out of love what my limits were. It took me years to unpick which limits were actually real and which ones had just been handed to me so many times that I'd stopped noticing that they weren't actually mine. That's where the excellent excuse came from. Not weakness or laziness, just a script I'd been given so early that I mistook it for the truth. My mum thinks I am reckless with my children now. The things I let them try, the things I refuse to rule out on their behalf. She comes from a very different script that she followed out of love and deserves nothing but respect. I don't follow that script. My children get bad days and they get rest and they get every accommodation that they genuinely need, but I'm not dismissing their reality. I live the same reality and I know exactly what it costs. What they don't get is the excuse. If they want to play tennis, we'll play tennis. If they want to build some furniture, we'll build some furniture. If they wanted to run a marathon, I would find a way to make it happen. And heaven help anyone, a teacher, a stranger, an algorithm who suggested otherwise. When my middle daughter's school stopped trying to teach her to read and write because she had a medical complexity and a convenient excuse that wouldn't affect their statistics, I recognised that script immediately. Not because I'm a perfect advocate, because I'd been handed versions of it myself. She went up 4 book levels in 6 months and has about 200 books. That's what happens when someone refuses to follow the script. I didn't have a parent who understood this from the inside. I didn't have anyone who could tell me which battles were worth fighting and which treatments were worth pursuing, which days to push through and which days to actually stop. I made the map myself, slowly, expensively, through decades of trial and error and a period where the excuse was too easy to reach for and that I let myself reach for. My children had the map on day one. They have the condition, they have every hard thing that comes with it, but they also have someone who has already walked that territory, who knows the language, who will never produce that pitying head tilt, who made every mistake first so that they don't have to. 3 generations, the same condition, 3 completely different stories about what that means. My mum's story, protect her, she's fragile. My story, maybe she's right. My children's story, absolutely not. My mum gave me everything she had. I'm giving my children everything I have. The difference isn't love, it's that I've lived inside it. I gave them the condition. I also gave them everything I know about not letting it win. At least they've got me. And I think most days that's enough. Feel anyway.